Hey, Sip&Talkers. It's your host, Joe, and with me as always, Sunny.
Welcome to EP450-1.
Yeah.
Morning. How was your sleep? My drunk neighbor woke me up. I thought, maybe I should just stay up all night so I can't be woken up.
What are you hinting at? Let's get back on track. Our topic today. From Taiwan's vice president to the European Parliament, and then Beijing jumps in claiming, you are suppressing us. This sounds a bit absurd, right?
Yeah, it definitely has that feel, doesn't it? Like a tiny diplomatic ripple causing this huge wave on the other side. It's a whole performance, really.
Yes, that's exactly the high-stakes scenario we're digging into today. Taiwan's Hsiao Bi-khim, the VP, she travels to Brussels, gives a speech inside the European Parliament complex. Now, it was presented as, an exchange, sharing democratic values.
But China saw it very differently.
Oh, immediately.
So we've got ourselves a major international moment here. Today, we're going to try and unpack, three main things. First, why did this specific speech from Hsiao Bi-khim cause such a strong and immediate reaction from Beijing?
And second, we really need to get into these clashing stories. Why does China actually say it's being suppressed, especially by something hosted by, non-official lawmakers? What's the thinking there?
Exactly. And third, the group that kind of made this all possible, the Interparliamentary Alliance on China, or IPAC. We need to understand, what is this group? Why is it so important here? And how did it manage to turn this exchange into such a big event that Europe, Taiwan, and China all had to put out statements?
Yeah, our goal today is really to give you a clear path through this whole thing. We'll look at Taiwan's clever diplomatic move, China's very predictable reaction pattern, and this sort of deeper clash of ideas driving it all.
All right, grab your coffee. Let's get into today's Sip and Talk. When the European Parliament meets Taiwan, a vice president, and China's diplomatic tug-of-war. Okay, so let's start with this group, IPAC. Because whenever you see a really high-level Taiwanese official getting access like this in a major Western institution, you just know there's some clever mechanism behind it.
Right, and IPAC is the key here.
Yeah.
What's really interesting is that IPAC isn't like a government thing itself. It's more like a united front of lawmakers from democracies all over the world. They're acting outside their official government roles, in a way.
Lawmakers, not governments.
Exactly. It's a cross-party, cross-national alliance. You've got people from Europe, the U.S., Canada, Japan, Australia, tons of places across the Indo-Pacific.
So it's global, not just regional, and all focused on China policy.
That's right. It started up back in June 2020, and its main purpose is to get democratic legislators working together, coordinating how they respond to the systemic challenges that China's policies present globally.
We hear that phrase, systemic challenges, tossed around a lot. What does that actually mean in practice? What kind of challenges is IPAC looking at?
They tend to focus on four main buckets. Human rights issues, Xinjiang, Hong Kong, security stuff like the threats to Taiwan or in the South China Sea. Then there's economic coercion, where China uses trade to pressure countries. And finally, transparency around China's global influence efforts.
And the key is they coordinate.
Yes, that's the power of it. That lets members push for similar laws at the same time, like maybe coordinating sanctions on specific Chinese officials involved in human rights abuses. So it happens across multiple countries together.
Okay. So that makes it much harder for Beijing to retaliate effectively. If just one country acts, Beijing can target them. But if 20 countries act together...
Exactly. The cost of hitting back goes way, way up for Beijing. It creates this strong, unified platform based on shared values. It makes it look like a collective defense of international norms, not just, one country complaining.
Okay, but that still doesn't quite explain how a sitting Taiwanese vice president gets to speak inside the European Parliament building, given that most EU countries follow a one China policy and don't officially recognize Taiwan. That's the diplomatic puzzle.
Right, and this is where the genius or maybe the cleverness of the setup comes in. The absolute key point is that IPAC is an alliance of legislators, individual MPs or MEPs. It is not an official institution of the European Union itself or even the European Parliament as an official body.
Okay, so the building is just the location, the venue, but the host isn't the EU.
Precisely. And that non-official status creates this critical, loophole, where you could call it a diplomatic gray area. It means someone very senior from Taiwan, like VP Hsiao, can physically be in the EP building, give a speech there.
Without the EU as an institution officially breaking its own one China policy.
Correct. The EU can maintain, and this is the crucial diplomatic cover, look, the EU didn't invite her. A group of individual lawmakers who aren't acting as the EU did.
Wow. That's threading a very fine needle. It's like renting a room in a government building for a private club meeting. The government didn't host it, even if it happened on their premises.
Exactly. It achieves what Taiwan wants, huge international visibility, symbolic legitimacy right there in Brussels, the heart of the EU. But it also gives European governments just enough plausible deniability to manage their relationships with Beijing, especially on trade.
And the location itself adds so much weight. Doing it inside the EP building sends a much stronger signal than, say, a hotel conference room down the street.
Absolutely. Even if the host is technically non-official, the symbolism of the location is massive. It makes the whole thing feel much more significant.
Okay, so IPAC skillfully set the stage. Now let's talk about the event itself. November 7th, 2025, in Brussels. This was genuinely historic, right? First time a sitting Taiwanese VP addressed a group like this inside the EP complex. What was the vibe?
Well, reports say the reception was really strong. Strategically, exactly what Taiwan would have hoped for. Hsiao gave this 20-minute speech. The title was Taiwan, a trusted partner in a volatile world. And apparently, she got a long-standing ovation afterwards.
From who?
From the audience, which was over 150 international guests. A real mix, European lawmakers, Americans, people from the Indo-Pacific region too. So that image itself, a Taiwanese VP speaking to this supportive, unified democratic group, that picture was powerful. That's the message Taiwan wanted to send globally.
Okay, let's get into the speech content. When you have a rare chance like this, every word counts. What was the core message? How did she position Taiwan?
She really leaned into the idea of shared democratic values. That was central, trying to lift Taiwan's image, beyond just being a problem or a dispute and framing it as a key democratic partner. She said something like, Europe has defended freedom under attack, and Taiwan has defended democracy under pressure.
Ah, that's smart. That immediately does two things, doesn't it? First, it connects Taiwan's situation directly to Europe's experience, especially with Ukraine in mind. That shared feeling of defending sovereignty against an authoritarian neighbor.
Right.
And second, it takes the issue out of just being about China's internal affairs, which is Beijing's line, and puts it firmly into that bigger global narrative, democracy versus authoritarianism.
Exactly. That was clearly the strategic aim. Shift the narrative away from Beijing's story that this is just an internal Chinese matter and position Taiwan as like a frontline state in defending liberal values globally.
And she didn't just talk about values, right? She must have talked about Taiwan's practical role in the world, too. That's often the stronger argument for, say, trade-focused Europe.
Oh, definitely. She highlighted Taiwan's crucial contributions, especially given that it's shut out of most official international organizations. Number one, of course, was semiconductors, the indispensable role in the global supply chain.
Can't run a modern economy without them.
Pretty much. But she also mentioned AI technology, Taiwan's expertise in public health, which we saw during the pandemic, and even disaster relief efforts. The underlying point was clear. Look, a strong, free Taiwan isn't just some nice idea. It's actually vital for the world's economy and stability.
That creates what you might call strategic mutual dependence. Europe needs Taiwan's tech, so it has a vested interest in Taiwan's security.
Right. It's not just asking for help. It's offering something essential in return. And she also hit the security issues head on. She called for deeper cooperation on defense, cybersecurity, protecting critical infrastructure.
Did she mention China directly in that context?
She warned explicitly about attempts to unilaterally change the status quo, saying they violate international consensus. And she talked about the hybrid threats Taiwan faces, constantly massive cyber attacks, the danger of undersea cables being cut, which would be catastrophic for global communication and finance.
So, stepping back, what were Taiwan's big picture goals for this whole trip, considering the risk and the inevitable blowback from China?
I think you can see three main objectives. First, just getting maximum international visibility, punching through Beijing's efforts to isolate Taiwan on the world stage.
Using IPAC as the lever.
Exactly. Second, strengthening this idea of a democratic alliance, using platforms like IPAC and using those economic bargaining chips like semiconductors and AI to try and get stronger security assurances, even if informal.
And third, there's usually a domestic angle too.
Absolutely. Political points back home. For the ruling party, the DPP, a trip like this is proof to voters that they can push back against Beijing's pressure, that they can find ways for Taiwan to engage with the world. When President Lai Ching-te called the trip profoundly meaningful, that wasn't just for an international audience. It was also for voters in Taiwan. It shows the government is delivering on its promises.
Okay, so the speech happens, big success for Taiwan diplomatically, and then, like clockwork.
The reaction from Beijing, swift, strong, and entirely predictable.
No surprises there.
None at all. The speech was November 7th. By the next day, November 8th, China's mission to the EU was already out with a formal statement. They lodged stern representations, which is diplomatic language for being really, really angry, and they condemned the European Parliament even though technically the EP wasn't the official host.
They didn't care about the technicality.
Not one bit. They went straight for the institution.
So what were the main complaints? What were the specific accusations in their statement? This usually follows a pattern.
They hit all the usual notes. Their standard playbook for anything involving Taiwan at this level. First and foremost, the big one. Violation of the One China principle. That's always number one, their absolute red line. They also made sure to call Hsiao Bi-khim a Taiwan independent separatist trying to undermine her legitimacy.
Okay, so attack Taiwan's status. What else? Usually they go after the host too.
Yep. Point two was accusing the EU of serious interference in China's internal affairs. By allowing the event, even indirectly, Europe was meddling in what Beijing insists is purely a domestic matter.
Yep.
And third, they claimed it severely undermined political mutual trust between China and the EU, which is basically code for.
This could hurt our trade relationship. A veiled threat.
A very thinly veiled threat, yes. And they didn't just imply it. They were pretty explicit in their warnings. They stressed that Taiwan involves China's core interests and represents a red line that cannot be crossed.
The message to European capitals being,
stop supporting these so-called separatists, or you put the entire China-EU relationship, including all that valuable trade, at risk. It's pressure politics 101.
This kind of really strong, almost disproportionate reaction blaming the whole EU for a meeting hosted by individual lawmakers. It really fits that pattern people call wolf warrior diplomacy, doesn't it?
It's like they pulled the script right off the shelf. It's that combination of diplomatic bullying and dangling economic consequences. You know that analogy we sometimes use, the international control freak ex-boyfriend.
Yeah. How does that apply here?
Well, think about it. Taiwan, the ex, just talks to someone new, the EU via IP450. The reaction isn't quiet disapproval. It's an immediate, loud public outburst aimed at intimidating the new contact.
So the stern representation is like,
it's like slamming your fist on the table and shouting, "She's mine. Anyone talks to her, you answer to me." It's about making a public example, making other countries hesitant to engage with Taiwan in the future. Deterrence through intimidation.
And threatening the Sino-EU trust. That's aimed squarely at the big economic players in Europe, right? Germany, France.
Exactly. That's the message to the big guys with lots of trade with China. It's like saying, hey, if you let this separatist hang around here again, maybe the valuable contracts start drying up. It's designed to get the business lobbies in Europe worried, to put pressure on their own governments to cool it with Taiwan.
And the crucial thing is, this isn't just talk. We've seen Beijing actually follow through on threats like this, even when it hurts them economically, too.
That historical context is so important. You have to remember what happened in 2021. China slapped sanctions on several EU Parliament members, academics, even think tanks, all because of criticism over human rights in Xinjiang.
And that had real consequences.
Huge consequences. That action directly caused the European Parliament to freeze the comprehensive agreement on investment, the CAI. This huge trade and investment deal between the EU and China, years in the making.
Poof. Gone. Just like that.
Shelved indefinitely. And that showed everyone Beijing's pain threshold. They basically said, we are willing to sacrifice a massive economic agreement, potentially worth billions, if you cross us on what we consider core interests like Xinjiang or Taiwan. That set a very powerful precedent. It shows the threats against the EU are credible, and defying Beijing can have very high costs, which ironically is why Taiwan and its supporters need these clever gray zone tactics like using IPAC in the first place.
Okay, this really brings us to the heart of the matter, doesn't it? This fundamental clash in how things are seen. On one side, you have Western democracies saying actions like hosting Hsiao or putting sanctions on officials are about curbing aggression or dealing with a systemic challenge.
Right, necessary responses to bad behavior.
But Beijing looks at the exact same events and calls it Western suppression, containment, an effort to hold China down. How can the same action be interpreted so differently? We need to try and objectively understand both viewpoints.
It's a massive divide. It's like they're operating in different realities with different rule books.
Yeah.
Let's start with the Western perspective. Why do they feel they need to curb aggression? What's the evidence they point to? It's not just made up, right?
No, Western policy, at least in theory, is supposed to be based on observable facts. So what are the facts driving this approach towards China?
Well, you can look at several concrete areas. First, military buildup. Independent bodies like Superior track defense spending. China's budget keeps going up, around 7% year on year recently. It hit something like $314 billion in 2024. That sustained, high level of growth signals more than just defense. It suggests power projection.
And it's not just spending, it's actions. The pressure on Taiwan, for example.
Absolutely. Taiwan reported over 1,700 military flights into its Air Defense Identification Zone, the ADIZ. In 2024 alone, that's nearly 5 flights every single day. Now, an ADZ isn't sovereign airspace, technically.
But it's a buffer zone, and sending military planes in constantly is provocative.
Hugely provocative. It wears down Taiwan's defenses, tests their reactions, and tries to make the presence of Chinese military forces near Taiwan seem normal. It's a form of aggression through constant pressure.
Okay, so military actions, what else?
Human rights and the rule of law. You have UN reports talking about potential crimes against humanity in Xinjiang. You have the crackdown in Hong Kong. Hundreds arrested under the national security law, democracy basically dismantled. For Western countries, these aren't just internal matters. They're seen as violations of international commitments and basic human rights norms, which demand some kind of response.
And the third piece is economic coercion.
Right. This hits closer to home for many countries. There's data showing China has used economic pressure tactics, trade restrictions, boycotts over 120 times against different countries in the last decade or so. The big example in Europe was Lithuania. After they let Taiwan open an office using the name Taiwan, their trade with China plummeted like 90%.
Wow.
So the Western argument is, look, our policies are targeting specific negative actions. Military intimidation, rights abuses, economic bullying. We're not trying to stop China's economic rise overall, but we have to push back against these harmful behaviors.
Okay, that's the Western rationale. Now, flip it. How does Beijing manage to convincingly argue both domestically and to parts of the world that they are the ones being suppressed, despite all this evidence?
It comes down to a fundamental difference in worldview, often called the security dilemma. From Beijing's perspective, almost any action taken by the U.S. or its allies that enhances their own security is automatically seen as an offensive threat aimed at containing China.
So defensive moves are seen as offensive?
Pretty much. Think about alliances like AUKUS Australia, UK, U.S. sharing submarine tech, or the Quad U.S., Japan, Australia, India cooperating. From a Western view, these are defensive alignments to ensure regional stability. From Beijing's view, they look like military encirclement designed to hem China in.
And things like tech restrictions, limits on selling advanced chips or chip-making gear to Chinese companies.
That's seen as economic warfare, not as protecting national security or preventing military misuse of technology, but as a deliberate strategy to strangle China's tech development and stop its rise. They call it strategic squeezing.
So they take criticism or countermeasures and repackage it.
Exactly. It gets woven into this powerful victimhood narrative. Criticize human rights. That's interference in our internal affairs, designed to destabilize us. Taiwan's VP speaks somewhere. That's promoting separatism and undermining our sovereignty. It skillfully reframes any pushback. It changes the story from you're being called out for doing bad things to you're being unfairly targeted because you're becoming strong.
And that narrative can be very effective, right? Both at home and internationally.
Very effective. It rallies nationalism domestically, and it resonates with some countries in the global south that have their own historical grievances with the West. It paints China as a fellow victim of Western hegemony.
Which brings us back to that diplomatic term, systemic challenge. Why use that specific kind of bland phrase? Why not just call it aggression or a threat, if that's what they mean?
That's diplomatic code. It's a carefully chosen euphemism. Systemic challenge does signal that the issue is serious, deep-rooted, and involves China challenging the fundamental rules and norms of the international system. So it conveys the gravity.
But without being too confrontational.
Exactly. It avoids terms like threat or aggression, which would likely shut down dialogue completely. Using systemic challenge allows Western governments to register strong criticism of China's behavior.
Its human rights record, its military actions, its economic coercion.
Right. All of that. But it does so in a way that theoretically leaves the door open for cooperation on other issues where China's involvement is essential, like climate change or global health. It's acknowledging China is too big and important to ignore, even while his actions are deeply problematic. It's the ultimate diplomatic tightrope act.
So we've mapped out the breakthrough, the backlash, the deep ideological split. Given all this, how is Taiwan adjusting its own strategy now, especially looking ahead after this IPAC success under the new administration?
Well, it seems like Taiwan's approach has definitely evolved, especially since around 2024. It shifted away from maybe just focusing on pragmatic diplomacy, trying to get individual trade deals here and there.
Which was getting harder anyway as Beijing squeezed their official allies.
Exactly. The new focus seems to be more on what you could call value-oriented democratic alliance diplomacy. It's less about the sheer number of countries that officially recognize Taiwan, and more about the quality and strength of its non-official networks, especially in security and the economy.
Building partnerships with democracies, even without formal ties.
Right. And there's a useful way to think about this strategy, sometimes framed as the 3 no's, 3 yeses. It helps clarify what Taiwan won't do and what it will actively pursue.
Okay, let's hear them. What are the 3 no's? These sound like they're about managing risk, avoiding giving Beijing an excuse to act.
Precisely. First, no provocation. This means sticking to the status quo, no formal declaration of independence, no big constitutional changes that Beijing could use as a casus a reason for war. This is crucial for maintaining international, especially U.S., support.
Makes sense. Second no.
No concession. This is an absolute refusal to accept Beijing's one country, two systems formula. After what everyone's seen happen in Hong Kong, that model is dead in the water for Taiwan. There's zero appetite for it.
And the third no sounds like it relates directly to the IPAC trip.
Exactly. No isolation. Taiwan will actively fight against Beijing's attempts to lock it out of the international community. They'll use every possible avenue, every loophole, every non-official platform like IPAC, like trying to get observer status in the WHO or other bodies to maintain a global presence.
Okay, those are the guardrails. What about the proactive side? The 3 yeses.
This is about building those alliances. First, yes, democratic unity. Actively working with the U.S., Europe, Japan, Australia, other democracies, building that common front based on shared values and interests.
Making common cause.
Second, yes, substantive cooperation. This isn't just talk, it's about real collaboration, especially in tech, defense, and securing supply chains. Think about things like the Democratic Chip Alliance idea, deepening ties with countries like Poland or Lithuania, focusing on tangible cooperation. Real stuff.
Technology as a diplomatic tool.
Hugely important. And the final yes is international participation. Keep pushing, constantly, relentlessly, for meaningful participation in international organizations, even if it's just as an observer. Show the world that Taiwan is a capable, responsible global player and that its exclusion is purely political, not based on merit.
So the overall strategy relies heavily on that idea of strategic interdependence we talked about earlier. Taiwan isn't just asking for help, it's offering something vital in return.
Absolutely. That's the core of it. Taiwan leverages its critical role, especially in semiconductors and potentially future AI development, as its main diplomatic asset. The message in Hsiao's speech, emphasizing strategic mutual dependence, really captured it. It's a two-way street. You need our technology for your economic future. We need your diplomatic space and security backing for our survival.
Okay, so looking forward then, we saw the success of this trip, but also the intensity of the backlash. What are the main risks we should be watching for now, both for Taiwan and for Europe?
I think the biggest risk, the one everyone worries about, is escalation. Will China decide that verbal protests and diplomatic warnings aren't enough? Will they move to actions with higher costs?
What would that look like, beyond just, say, freezing another trade agreement?
It could be broader economic sanctions, targeting specific European countries or sectors that are seen as getting too close to Taiwan. Maybe disrupting academic exchanges, things that put pressure on universities and research. Or, more worryingly, a significant increase in military intimidation around Taiwan. More frequent drills, crossing the median line in the strait more often, making the situation even more tense.
And for Europe, the risk is about staying united.
Right. That's the key question. Will the big EU players, Germany, France, Italy, the ones with the most trade at stake, maintain a firm line? Or will they start to wobble if Beijing really turns up the economic heat? The real test will be whether events like Bi-khim speaking via IPAC become, normalized.
Routine.
If it happens regularly, it loses its shock value.
Exactly. If it becomes routine, the diplomatic cost for Beijing to protest every single time goes way up, and their threats might lose some impact. But if Europe gets spooked and pulls back, then Taiwan risks being pushed back into greater isolation. It really hangs on European resolve. Well, this has been a really deep dive into a single event that reveals so much about the bigger picture. This whole episode, the IPAC maneuver, the speech, Beijing's furious response, it really is like a snapshot of this global struggle over values and power.
It absolutely is. You see China using this language of peaceful unification, which sounds nice, but in reality often masks an intent to expand its control, often through pressure and coercion. And on the other side, you see Taiwan using democratic alliance diplomacy, leveraging technology and shared values, just trying to survive and maintain its autonomy against that pressure.
It really boils down to whose vision for the world wins out, doesn't it? Is it going to be an order based on power and might makes right, or one based on international law, cooperation, and democratic principles? That's the underlying contest.
And that leads to a final thought, maybe something for you, the listener, to chew on. We talk a lot, quite rightly, about the risks and costs involved in standing up to Beijing, the economic blowback, the diplomatic headaches, the potential for things to escalate.
It's a constant calculation for policymakers.
It is. But maybe we don't spend enough time thinking about the opposite question. What's the long-term cost to global stability, to the rule of law, to the entire international system we rely on if democratic countries start pushing back? If they stop challenging these specific, documented instances of aggression, coercion, and expansionism, what happens then? That's the really heavy question facing leaders right now.
Lot to think about. Thanks for walking us through all that complexity, and thank you for joining us on Sip and Talk. If you found this discussion valuable, please do subscribe to the Sip and Talk podcast on whatever platform you use.
Yeah, and hey, while you're at it, check out our friend Mickey's YouTube channel, Mickytolife. Lots of fun stuff there, memes, new travel vlogs, always worth a look. We'll catch you next time.